Hey y'all, welcome back to Proficiency in Play. My name's Pip, your Dungeon Master. Today we're going to be taking a look at the custom class that I designed, which I called the Apothecary. This is completely unique to me and is not based in any way on any other homebrewed apothecaries. I know that there have been some other groups that have made a apothecary class, but I have not looked into any of those. This is just my idea for a custom class. And I called them the Masters of Preparation. So let's talk a little bit about why I felt like another class was necessary or good. And there's a few reasons for that. The first biggest reason for the Apothecary class is I've been running D&D for a long time, and at least at my tables, when I reward my players with magic items, they never got excited to have consumable magic items, except potions of healing. And when they did get it, they never really used them, any consumables besides healing potions. And I wanted to utilize consumable magic items because there are just so many really neat ones. But finding a place to do so in D&D was difficult, at least at my table. You might have a different experience than that, but my people always wanted new weapons and new armor and didn't really care for special potions or poisons or anything like that. Even spell scrolls didn't really get used because of the kind of complicated nature of using them, and I found that if you give anyone a one-time use thing, they're just scared to use it and it never gets used. So the Apothecary is based on consumables, and I thought that no class that exists really specialized in that. Another thing the Apothecary is focused on is the crafting of magic items and consumables. And I know that D&D 2024 does have some updated magic item crafting rules. But in the scope of most campaigns, the time requirements are just not very manageable. Unless you hire some people to do it for you or have long periods of off time. And in a lot of games that I've played, people don't really want that. In some kind of apocalyptic game, they don't want this idea that things are stretching out and out and out. People want to play fast, and they want to do things quick. And I felt like crafting rules didn't really make that feasible. The third thing is that the Apothecary can give a player increased agency in the magic items that they want, and how they want themselves and their party to be defined by the magic items that they get. I'm a big proponent of giving your players customized magic items that really make them shine. But sometimes you want to let the player decide what they want and when they want it. And this is an interesting way I thought we could do that. The fourth thing is there are some chemistry-focused characters that I just didn't feel like really fit into any of the traditional classes. Something like a potion master or a witch doctor character that uses magical poultices and potions to accomplish what they want. I think there's some really interesting character ideas that come out there. They don't really fit in the warlock or wizard or sorcerer classes. They don't really feel quite right. Even like a witch that brews over a cauldron, it just wasn't really able to be done well. The Apothecary is a good place to do something like that. The last and final thing that I won't harp on too much is I personally don't care for the Artificer class. I've had several Artificers in games over the years, and it's always been difficult to manage them with the rest of the party. And I found that people, at least the people I've had play the Artificer in my game, want some special treatment when it comes to just being able to do anything and everything with anything mechanical. I know that that's not really a fault of the Artificer class. I've just found that the way Artificer is played at my table in the past kind of turned me off from the Artificer class. And I feel like some of the Apothecary subclasses especially can fill the gap that I think the Artificer is trying to fill. in a way that, for me at my table, hopefully will work a little better. And it might work better at your table too. Again, if you love the Artificer and it's your favorite class, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is just a subjective, personal opinion that I have, and I've been burned by an Artificer a time or two, and I just don't really like utilizing them at my table. So I want to give those players that are drawn to that Artificer style of crafting and creating, I want to give them a way to still play those kinds of characters. So I made the Apothecary. All right, moving on, let's talk a little bit about, in character, what the Apothecary is. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. You're welcome to pause the video here if you want to read this. I just typed up a couple paragraph blurb of what the base Apothecary is. In general, they're masters of preparation, they're problem solvers, and they are a last resort safety net to get their friends out of trouble. They're out-of-the-box thinkers and always have a solution in hand, and I've tried to make the mechanics of their abilities really support that. When making this class, I kind of thought of a character from TV named MacGyver that you guys might know, who kind of always just used what was around and his knowledge of the way the world works to solve some crazy problems with some pretty simple yet really out-of-the-box solutions. And the Apothecary is good at playing that kind of character. All right, let's get down to brass tacks in the mechanisms that drive the Apothecary. The Apothecary is not a spellcaster, but kind of is built around a support style character that can often take the place of a spellcaster in a traditional party. So we'll talk a little bit about why that's the case. And one of the subclasses is pretty much a spellcaster, but I'll talk to you about how I got around that. Their primary ability is intelligence. It's really important for an analyst to be intelligent regardless of the subclass they take, as the crafting and utilization of magic items is an intelligence-based situation for the Apothecary. They have learned to harness this through study. I gave them a D8 per Apothecary level hit point die. The Apothecary also utilizes the hit point die as a consumable in a really flexible and interesting way. So I wanted them to be not as squishy as a wizard, but they are a support backline class in general. And I wanted them to have that D8 hit die because they're not really going to be tanky or fighters except for one of the subclasses. So I lined them up with things like the Bard because they fill a similar role to something like that. They do have proficiencies in intelligence and dexterity saving throws, and will get 3 skill proficiencies on top of anything that you would get normally in character creation from this list that I made that primarily focuses on medicinal and survival type skills. They are proficient in simple weapons, short swords, hand crossbows, light crossbows, and blowguns. I do not want them to be masters of martial warfare, though because they're not really spellcasters, I needed to give them some ways to handle themselves in a fight, and I thought crossbows being their kind of main weapon type was a really interesting way to do that. They will be proficient in alchemist supplies and the herbalism kit, and they have proficiency only in light armor. Let's talk a little bit about how the Apothecary will grow and what features come with the class. So the defining feature of the Apothecary comes right at level 1, of course, and it's alchemy points. The idea of these alchemy points is they are a spendable resource equal to twice your Apothecary level. I did it this way so you can't just dip into Apothecary to get a lot of value. Multiclassing is an interesting thing, but I designed the Apothecary to be primarily stand on its own. Not that multiclassing cannot be used with it, but it was designed to really shine as a full Apothecary. These alchemy points at the beginning of the game can be used 1 point per 1 consumable for any of the consumables and supplies that exist on the equipment page of the player's handbook. So right at level 1, you can make some simple things like caltrops, like rope if you need it, torches, including on that page of the player's handbook, there are spell scrolls. So you can make level 1 spell scrolls and cantrip spell scrolls, as well as potions of healing, which are really nice ways to get stronger support right from the beginning, though the level 1 spell scrolls will cost you both of your apothecary points at level 1. Both of your alchemy points at level 1, I'm sorry. At level 2, you get one of the most important features for all of the apothecary subclasses, and that is quick consumables. It's very simple. Any consumable that typically takes an action to use, you can use as a bonus action. So I know they made this change for potions of healing from action to bonus action in the 2024 D&D rules, but there are a lot of magic items and consumables and such that take actions to use, and it really limits them because you have to give up most of your turn to use them. For an apothecary, they have this quick consumables feature so that they can utilize their consumables frequently while still being able to focus on the other parts of their classes, of the class. They have this quick consumables feature so they can use their consumables regularly and frequently, which is the real crux of the class, and still be able to make a weapon attack if they need to, or utilize some other actions that are important. At level 3, you get a subclass. Now, I actually recently changed the apothecary since making this, and there are 4 subclasses that I have given to it: the chemist, the analyst, the steel striker, and the technomancer. So at level 3, you get your subclass. Every class gets their subclass at level 3 in the 2024 D&D rules, and I wanted to follow suit there. All right, let's keep going. Level 4, pretty simple. You get the ability score improvement or a feat of your choice for which you qualify. This is true in general at level 4, and they are, in this case, share with the Bard. At levels 8, 12, and 16, they'll get this ability again. Level 5 shows off the other big part of the apothecary class, and that is the hit dice. Now, I've found that, at least at my table, people don't short rest a lot. They go and they go and they go and they go, and then they long rest. And that's totally fine, but it means that hit dice just aren't really being used, and I thought that was tough. I want these hit dice to be a good utilizable feature, and I thought the apothecary could use them really well because it goes along with that consumable idea. These hit dice are, you use them and they're gone until, of course, you long rest and get them back. So they can effectively, as a bonus action, use one of their hit dice in combat on themselves or any other creature that they touch, and it will heal just like the hit dice regularly would. But rather than having to be during a short rest, they can just use them as a bonus action to get limited amounts of healing. Now remember, these are D8s, so they're not massively good, and apothecaries often won't have incredibly high constitution either, but it's still, in the early levels, a really important way to just keep people going. And with the apothecary, the focus on medicine, these flexible hit dice are a surefire and amazing way to bring someone back up who is unconscious at 0 hit points, because you can spend a hit dice without having to spend a spell or a potion or something to just pop them back up. And even if you roll really low on the hit die, they're going to pop back up. So just a really flexible, supportive tool that's not going to replace something like a cleric with a lot of healing, but it's a great support to that. Or If you have a party that just doesn't want that designated healer, nobody wants to play that, the Apothecary can give you a chance to skin towards healing while still having some more interesting combat or more interesting utility as well. At level 7, they get an ability called Prepared. This ability is based off of the Diviner's Portent ability. The wizard subclass of Diviner has pretty much this ability, not exactly, but a very similar ability, and I really liked that ability, but I found that nobody really plays Diviners. When they play wizards, everybody wants to play an Evoker or an Illusionist usually, and so the cool Portent ability of the Diviner Wizard just never got used, and I really like the idea. If you don't know what this ability does, effectively, I've made it 3. Portent usually comes with 2. But every long rest, you're going to roll 3 d20s and just make note of the result. Anytime you make a d20 check that adventuring day, you can, instead of rolling, this is really important, not after you've seen the roll, but anytime you would need to make a d20 check, you can decide, I don't want to roll for this, I'm going to use one of my stashed rolls. So if you get some 18, 19, 20 and stash it, and a really important check comes up, instead of rolling, you can be like, I'm just going to use my stashed roll. I'm prepared for this. I've thought ahead, and I need to pass this one. So I'm going to use one of my big rolls. Now, this can only be done 3 times per long rest, which actually doesn't... You'll run out of it sooner than you would think. The other thing you can do is, as a reaction, when another creature makes a d20 roll against you or your allies, so this would be somebody makes a saving throw against you or one of your allies, somebody makes an attack roll against you or one of your allies. Again, before the roll is seen, you can say, wait, DM, don't roll that. I'm going to use one of my stashed rolls. And the reason this is really important is because if at the long rest you roll a 1, a 4, and a 4, you're never going to replace one of your rolls with that. They're like automatic failures. But if you can give one of those to the creature making the saving throw against charm person, that becomes way more interesting. You can pretty much guarantee an enemy fails in those lower rolls. And I wanted to make sure that this ability was always relevant, even if you rolled really poorly. So if you roll poorly, use it on an enemy. If you roll really great, use it on yourself. And it can be really, really nice to have. But you got to kind of decide when you want to use it. And then once it's used, it's gone. Any unused rolls at the next long rest, you'll re-roll them and erase any of the stashed rolls that you have not used yet. That leads us to the next feature that they get, which is at level 10. Remember, these in-between levels, you're still getting something, whether that be a feat or a subclass ability. So it's not like you don't get anything between levels 8, like levels 8 and 9. You do. But for the main class, the next feature is at level 10. Again, a pretty simple one, but a very powerful one. Your hit die becomes a d10 for all your Apothecary levels, and this does backdate, effectively. So you will get an influx of hit points. Effectively, it actually, from d8 to d10, only will give you 1 extra hit point per level, but you'll get 10 additional hit points at this point, and anything that you use your hit die for, like the flexible hit dice healing and this level 14 ability, I know the answer, you get to roll the d10 instead. Additionally, you will regain all your spent hit dice on a short or long rest. So if you do take those short rests as a party, this is a really great way for you to be able to be utilizing your hit dice, healing each other, healing yourself in combat, and then still having them if you need to take that short rest and heal up. Obviously, you would gain all your spent hit dice on the completion of a short rest. So how this would work is, if you need to heal during a short rest with your hit dice, you have to use whatever you have left in your pool. You haven't gained them back yet. But once you finish that short rest, you can utilize them. Now, of course, you do have flexible hit dice. So upon the completion of a short rest, you can just take a couple of rounds, a few seconds to pump them into yourself if you need to. But that's how this would work. At level 14, they get a feature called I Know the Answer. And this, again, utilizes the hit dice. And this is the one I just came up with the most recently, and I'm a little concerned that it won't work the way I think, but I'm really excited to try it out and give it tweaks. As always, when you make a custom class like this, the first draft is just kind of rough around the edges and you see what tweaking needs to be done. But I got to get that first draft out there so we can play test it and figure it out. That's why I'm so excited that Gemma in my podcasted live play game is playing an Apothecary so I can get some feedback on some of these things and how they feel from a player's perspective. Getting into I Know the Answer though, as an action, you touch a creature and you'll roll hit dice one at a time and add the results together. Once you meet the threshold, you can cure the following status ailments. Now, upon touching the creature, you do need to pick one status effect and roll for that. Let's say they were deafened, blinded, and grappled somehow. You can't cure all three on your way to that 10 grappled. You have to pick one. But as an action, you touch the following creature and you say, let's say they're stunned, which is awful. You can use your turn, take the action, touch them, and begin rolling your hit dice one at a time until the total of your roll meets or exceeds, in this case for stunned, 18. Once that does, the stunned condition goes away, which can be really, really important to get those conditions off your allies really quickly, and you have spent whatever hit dice it took to get there. Stunned, technically, if you roll really well, can be dealt with in 2 hit dice, but it could take 6 or 7 or 8. Just depends how the dice roll out. And that's why you roll them one at a time until you get there, because you don't always know how many you'll have to spend. And of course, if you run out of hit dice before meeting the criteria, let's say you had 3 hit dice left, tried for stunned, and just didn't get that 18 that you needed, the hit dice are spent and wasted, unfortunately. So it is something to consider. What's the likelihood of me meeting this? But stunned is a really rough condition. As paralyzed, unconscious, all of these conditions can be really important to get rid of sometimes. And the Apothecary can utilize these D10 hit dice to try and restore their allies. Obviously, if you have a condition that doesn't allow you to take actions, then you can't do this for yourself. You do need to be able to take an action. Now, if you have a lesser condition like deafened or blinded and you can still take actions, you could cure yourself with this. So just a really interesting way to get some restoration in without utilizing spellcasting. All right, the last 2 things for the Apothecary class. Level 17 is improved consumables. I haven't really talked about how this works completely because I want to get into it in the subclasses. But how the Apothecary works is they spend their alchemy points every day at a long rest to craft magic consumables or equipment or gadgets, but they only last for 24 hours. They don't have the magical power to just keep them in play all the time. So if a chemist makes some potions of greater healing, that's great, but you can't stockpile them. They only last 24 hours, and once they're gone, they're gone. And if you make it to the next long rest and didn't use them, the magic inside of them will fade, and they will become useless. Until you hit level 17, which means your consumables or equipment or gadgets become permanent, allowing you to retain use of any unused consumables, which technically means during downtime, a high-level Apothecary could stockpile some magic consumables if they had, let's say, a week or so to prepare for something. So that's a really interesting thing. That's why I locked it behind level 17, because it could absolutely break a game earlier on. Level 19, you're going to get an epic boon feat. This is pretty true for classes across the board, and I won't go too much into that but it's just an awesome feat that you get later in the game that allows you to do something really neat. Let's talk a little bit about the subclasses. As I said, there are 4 of them, and they are relatively different. They, of course, all get all of the base Apothecary features, but they utilize them in different ways, which I'll get into. I am not going to break down every feature they get at every level. I'm just going to do a kind of wide angle overview of the subclasses because this video would be super long if I went into every feature. But let's talk a little bit about what they are. First up, we have the Chemist. The Chemist, originally it was called Alchemist. I changed the name, so that's just a typo there. The Chemist is a master of potions and organic ingredients, and they have the ability to channel their magic to increase the potency of organic mixtures. These are your potion makers, your potion masters, and some of their features allow them to move more quickly, and they're very dexterous, and they use quick bodies, like I said, quick bodies and quick wit to solve problems on the fly, you see there. So these are, rather than the super prepared apothecaries, these are the apothecaries who have studied so much and harnessed their bodies and their minds so much that they can always come up with a solution on the spot, and their abilities really show that. I'm not going to dig in too deep, but these are the masters of potion crafting, and they'll use their alchemy points to create a bunch of consumable potions that exist in the Dungeon Master's Guide as magic items, including all the way up to, at level 17, a potion of Storm Giant Strength. Now that's very, very expensive to craft with your alchemy points, but it's a really important thing. Along with the potions, which obviously are great for healing and buffing, I also added to them, to round them out, poisons. So they gain the ability to create all of the poisons listed in the Dungeon Master's Guide as well. And so they're kind of a healer and damager. They utilize poisons to damage, they utilize potions to heal and buff, and a really great utility class. One of their defining features they get early on is that they get to max out any healing or damage that's done by a consumable that they use. Many consumables say, a healing potion does 2d4 plus 2 healing. That's awesome. But in the hands of a chemist, you don't have to roll those 2d4. You're going to just get the 10, the maximum that you could roll. And that scales up pretty amazingly with the higher level poisons and the higher level healing potions. Their secondary stat is dexterity. They are only proficient in light armor, but they move really quickly. And the big thing is they move through the battlefield so quickly that they can be a good support to the people that are there. They also get some additional proficiencies, a proficiency in the Poisoner's Kit, and 2 additional skills from the Apothecary list that we saw at the beginning of this video. Next up, we have the Analyst. Now, for those of you watching the podcast, if you're watching this really early, it hasn't happened yet, but Gemma is going the Analyst subclass route. So this is one that we'll be able to get to see in action really well. The Analyst is a master of information. They are very intelligence focused, and they utilize their intellect to gain information that others might overlook. The Analysts, not like the Chemists, are hyper prepared, almost the exact opposite. The Chemist is trained but goes in and just says, hey, I'm going to use whatever I have to really make this work. The Analyst never goes in without preparing and researching and knowing that they have the answers for the things coming up. And they channel their magic through the written word, specifically utilizing their alchemy points to craft spell scrolls. Now, as I said, the Apothecary is not a spellcaster, but the Analyst does utilize spell scrolls to mimic a spellcaster. A few things that they are advantaged on is because spell scrolls take a magic action to use, the Analyst, with quick consumables from the Apothecary feature, can use them as a bonus action. So even action long spells, they can bonus action. And the double spell rule in the 2024 rules, D&D rules, is that you cannot cast 2 spells that take a spell slot. 2 leveled spells that take a spell slot per turn. And because the analyst isn't using spell slots, they technically could bonus action, fireball, action, fireball. That sounds super potent, and it is. The way I've balanced this is the spell scrolls are incredibly expensive when it comes to their alchemy points. So compared to a real spellcaster, the amount of spells they can cast per day is very, very limited, and they have to choose the spells beforehand. And because they're spell scrolls, they have to choose precisely how many casts of each spell they're spending on. For a prepared spellcaster, like a wizard, you do have to prepare the spells that you're going to take. But if I have 3 level 3 spell slots, I can, in the moment, choose what I want to use them on. I can fireball 3 times. I can use 3 different spells, level 3 spells, and I can decide that in the moment. The analyst does not have this freedom. The analyst has to assign the particular spell to the scroll when they purchase it during the long rest, when they make it during the long rest. So even if they have the points to get 3 level 3 spells, they have to choose at the long rest which spells they're going to take. And they can't mix and match after the fact. So if they want the 3 fireballs, they can make 3 fireball scrolls, but they know those are the only spells they're going to be able to cast. The secondary part of the analyst is they have an analysis ability that they get at level 3, and this is what really grows. The 2 ways the analyst grows is more and more powerful spells that they can cast as they level up, and their analysis gets better. Early on, this allows them to make an intelligence check to see the stat blocks of their enemies straight out of the book. If you're fighting an enemy and you pass the check, I as a DM will literally give Gemma a handout with the true stat block of the enemy. It's very, very interesting and can make you make some really different decisions. If you know that enemy is 2 hit points away from dead, even if you guys are dying, you might not run, you might just finish them off. Later on, I actually gave the analyst the ability to manipulate the stat block by lowering numbers, removing resistances, even towards the end of the game, adding vulnerabilities to certain damage types. So the analyst, by really just paying enough attention and learning about these creatures, have found their weak points and are able to manipulate their stat block. Next up, we have the Steel Striker. And the Steel Striker is my take on the Master of Arms / Blacksmith. This is an apothecary that channels their magic through metalworking specifically. The chemist uses potions and poisons. The analyst uses scrolls. The Steel Striker uses arms and armors. The secondary stat the Steel Striker really wants is strength, because they are the most self-reliant and the most combat-oriented of the apothecaries. We see that they get proficiencies in heavy armor, martial weapons, shields, smith's tools, and the athletics skill, skinning them much closer to that of like a fighter than the other apothecaries are. Where the analyst feels almost like a wizard, the Steel Striker will feel a little bit more like a fighter with this heavy armor, this increased armor class, as well as some capacity to have strong combat capabilities, such as they gain at level 6 the extra attack feature, just like fighters gain extra attack, where they make 2 attacks per turn. And instead of utilizing a lot of consumables, the Steel Striker uses their points to forge arms and armor. Now, originally these will be from the equipment page of the player's handbook, but as they get later and later on in the game, they begin forging better and better armor from the magic item pages of the Dungeon Master's Guide. And this is a great way for the Steel Striker to not only equip themselves with some really cool weapons and armor, but equip their party as well. Again, these weapons and armor will deteriorate after 24 hours until they hit level 17. But it's an awesome way for the Steel Striker to try out a lot of different arms and armor sets when knowing what they're going into. So preparation is important here as well. Do you want more utility arms and armor? Do you need stuff that excels in stealth or just big AC? Right? Two completely different things, but if you know what you're trying to do, the Steel Striker will really get you going there. Last, we have the Technomancer. Now, the Technomancer channels their magic into gadgets and gizmos and robots. So this kind of scratches the itch that the Beastmaster Ranger scratched, right? If you want a pet or you want some robots or things that really help you out that you can command during battle, the Technomancer is a perfect choice for you. But they can also make gadgets and gizmos, and they are proficient in firearms. Now, I don't utilize a lot of firearms in my games because sometimes they just don't really feel like they fit. But the Technomancer, especially in a world like EOS, where Revel has reached this industrial revolution early, can utilize firearms in a really interesting way. I also gave them proficiencies in Tinkerer's tools and the perception and sleight of hand skills. They primarily use their alchemy points to customize and power gadgets and robots. How this works, and I won't get into too much detail, but how this works is they go shopping and they use their alchemy points to say, I want this many hit points. I want this much armor class for my robot. If I want it to have a fly speed, I can add that on. If I want it to have multi-attack, I can add that on. But with your limited amount of alchemy points, you have to decide what is most important to you. Also, later on in the game, you can say either I want one really buff, beefy, double attacking, 16 armor class, big tanky robot friend. Or maybe I want two little drones that fly above my shoulders and shoot lasers. Or maybe I want an army of tiny little bots that just don't do much, but they overwhelm in numbers. And if you're not into the robots, you can use your alchemy points to customize a lot of gadgets that let you cheat some of the normal rules, things that let you control gravity for yourself, things that let you turn yourself invisible through tech, things that might let you add particular effects to your firearms or other weapons that you would use. And there's just so much flexibility in the customization of these weapons and robots, and it just really scratches that itch of someone who wants to be that high-tech fighter who just controls the battleground. That's all I got for this one, guys. Thanks so much for watching my breakdown of the Apothecary custom class. And I hope it was interesting for you. Again, the character Gemma in my live play podcast of Proficiency in Play is playing the Analyst Apothecary, so we'll get to see that more and more and really flesh that out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.